In this video, we're going to demonstrate all fours and how to do this position a few different ways, and we'll be explaining how we're getting there as we're going through these variations. So if we get into this all fours position, we get the hands below the shoulders, knees below the hips, we can just let everything kind of sink down and let gravity take us down. So this is a good place to start from, and we'll just see if we can kind of relax tension and let everything go along for the ride. And so the rib cage comes down towards the ground here. The shoulder blades are going to kind of move back naturally. We're going to fall into a little bit more of an arched or extended position throughout the spine. And then from here, we really have three different options. So in this all fours position, we are going to either round the spine up toward the ceiling a little bit more at the mid back. We're going to arch the spine a little bit more and move the upper body up, or we're going to move up relatively equally. Then we can get there in a few different ways. So let's go through those three. So the first one would be pushing through the ground and then rounding this mid-back area here up a little bit more than everything else. And so if I really start to exaggerate that to the point where I'm tensing a lot in the abdomen versus just pushing from the hands, I'm going to end up tucking the sternum way up, and you'll see the head and neck come forward as a result. So if I use the hands and I tuck the abdomen in, you're going to see this kind of a shape, and we get that mid-back coming up as that head and neck then get pushed forward. Now, if I don't involve those center abdominals quite as much, and I just use my hands to not only push down, but also forward on an angle, you can see that I can still get that mid-back up a little bit relative to the rest of my body, but I'm not going into as much of that posterior pelvic tilt and lumbar flexion, and the head and neck don't get pulled down. This is a little bit more subtle, but this is a way to get expansion in that mid-back area just through pushing through the hands, not by compressing that sternum down and under or tucking the hips. Now, if I want to go on the other end of the spectrum here, I could use the hands to push the head and neck up, and you'll see that I have a little bit more of an arched position here at the level of the mid-back, but my upper thoracic spine and cervical spine are coming up in between the shoulder blades here. And so in this position, really, the only thing that can really be moving me up into this position is the pushing from the arms. Now the last, and I think a good place for everyone to start, is to be able to move the entire spine away from the ground in a relatively equal sense. So not the upper part of the rib cage or lower part of the rib cage coming up more than the other, but having a straight down force through the ground that brings everything up at the same amount. So we have the head, neck, and rib cage now all coming straight away from the ground. And as I do this here, I'm really just generating this by pushing the hands straight down into the ground, letting those shoulder blades wrap around and produce that force here. And so my rib cage is now moved back between my shoulder blades, and my shoulder blades are in a little bit more of a flush position relative to that rib cage. Now, a lot of people will try to make this happen by initiating this tucking under and rounding the back up. And so that's really like using the pelvis to move the rib cage, and that takes away the effort from the upper body. That's not what we're looking for. So instead, if that's you, you want to almost go towards a little bit of an anterior pelvic tilt. Let this relax a little bit. And then from this position, you'll be really disciplined about just pushing straight down through the ground with the upper body and trying to move that rib cage, cervical spine, and head away from the ground equally without creating a whole lot of tension in this center abdominal region. So if you got the hang of that, then you can bring your attention to what you're doing at the elbow and the hand. So at the elbow, there's often a tendency to want to lock out and do this. And so that often is just a substitution for being able to push straight down through that shoulder girdle. And so we want to unlock those elbows just a little bit. And then once we have a feel for that, it's going to be a little bit easier to then feel the shoulders as being what push straight down and transfer that force into the ground. Now, another place you can get into trouble here is if your hand tends to be completely flat to the ground. So if that's the case, you want to create a little bit of an arch under this inner part of the hand. You'll put a little more pressure towards the outside of the heel of the hand to start. If you have to turn your arms out to do that so that your elbow crease points straight ahead, that's fine. But then as you go to apply the force, you're going to allow slight turning in of the arms So the elbow points out and elbow creases point towards each other. As you do that, you should feel the pressure equalize in the outer and inner heels of the hand. You should be able to push straight down, again, not locking out the elbows, and you'll really feel those shoulders start to engage in this position. And if you want to add a little bit of breathing to this, I would recommend exhaling on the way up as you do your push. Then either inhaling in this new position or going back down to the start and doing this dynamically. So we could either inhale here, or we could inhale and come down. Exhale up, and inhale down. Now to get a little bit more shoulder blade motion going here, we could start to add a rock back. And this rock back is going to allow us to get a little bit more upward rotation in the scapula. And so what we want to think about here is if we have the scapula divided into two, we're going to push upwards this way, allowing that lower half of the scapula, so this angle down here, to come and wrap around the rib cage as this top part of the scapula stays back up toward the ceiling in this case. So a nice easy breath in here. We exhale and push. We think of that lower scapula coming around as that upper scapula stays up toward the ceiling. Go only as far as you can comfortably, maintaining those contacts in the hand. And then we'll inhale to return. Exhale back. And inhale to return. Okay, so those are the basics of getting that all fours position for working specifically that upper body and rib cage awareness. We'll do future trainings on how to involve that pelvis. Until next time, peace.